I think we're good.
I have,
All right, welcome everyone.
I don't know if he's in. I can check.
We are 2 minutes past 5:30, so let's get started for our budget workshop for tonight, Tuesday, May 5th. Feliz Cinco de Mayo for all those who celebrate. And if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. First. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is public comment. This portion of the meeting is specifically set aside for comments from the public who are asked to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Any person interested in providing public comment via email should email publicmeetings@rockyhillct.gov prior to 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting to have their public comment read into the record. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to speak? Here, step right up. Let's introduce yourself and give your address and...
Dominica Rockamora, 52 Grimes Road. So I just want to talk, and given that student enrollment has remained relatively flat over the past several years, how does the proposed budget justify the addition of several new positions? And also, what specific needs or changes are driving the expansion at this time?
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name's Sean Gavin, 39 Hawthorne Circle. Couple things Dominica just mentioned. We've got one director position being split into 2 director-level positions. We are adding teachers with an enrollment that is not increasing. Questions I have are the 24-25 special education budget was $728,431 less than this proposed budget. According to the report, they've added 1 student. The 2023 to 2024 budget, $51,659,153, 2,473 students. The proposed budget for tonight, $60,475,193. That is for 2,463 students. That's an $8.75 million increase, and we are down 10 students. The mayor ran his campaign on affordability and a level tax. I don't see how that's going to happen. I do want to thank Mr. Zito, though, for his time and service. I enjoyed working with him for several years on the Board of Ed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Any written comments?
None.
Submitted this evening? All right. Well, without further ado, first up is Board of Education.
Good evening, Mayor Smith, Town Council members, Ms. McKim, Mr. Carpentino. I'm Jess Lafredo. I am board chair. I am so happy to hear some of the public out tonight. I hope that they'll stick around to listen to some of the answers to their questions. Thank you for the invitation to speak this evening as we present the education budget for the 26-27 school year. My beginning words may be a bit lengthier than other board chairs. However, I hope to give you an educator's perspective and a different lens with which to see our data and our requests. I'd like to begin by grounding our conversation in a simple but powerful truth, a quote that you may have heard before by Benjamin Franklin. An investment in education always pays the highest returns. Regarding the Board of Education's operating budget, I hope tonight you will see that public education is not simply a line item. It is the foundation of our community's future. Every investment we make in our schools is an investment in people. Because that investment is actually shaping opportunities strengthening outcomes, and supporting the long-term successes of our students. Over the past several years, however, the Board of Education has been asked to make increasingly difficult and at times unreasonable sacrifices, often working within budgets and CIPs that have been reduced to the bare minimum. We have stretched every dollar, delayed critical purchases, and made difficult staffing decisions. We have responded to retirements, not by replacing staff, but by shifting personnel to fill gaps. We have phased in textbooks and building repairs over time, rather than purchasing things when needed. That type of purchasing pattern only delays the much-needed repairs and investments in our schools. And there has never been a wish list by teachers, only a deliberate focus on essential needs. Can this be the year that we look at our operating budget and our CIP differently? The budget being presented to you this evening is not a reflection of unnecessary spending. In fact, 7.64% of the budget is simply negotiated salaries, benefits, and transportation costs, including field trips. Only 1.3% of the budget actually represents a long overdue effort to restore resources, stipends, and teaching positions that have been lost in recent years. Over 12 hours of thoughtful deliberation, the Board of Education members unanimously voted for a budget that responsibly and intentionally addresses the needs of students and staff in our district. Here are the highlights of what we've discussed. Following an extensive discussion around class size, we are beginning the process of reducing class sizes and restoring teaching positions like the one that was cut last year. The board recently voted on new class size numbers starting in the 2026-2027 school year. These new class sizes are more in line with class sizes in area schools around us. In response to growing concerns around well-being and racism that were mentioned at a Voice Committee meeting held by the public in January, we are requesting a guidance counselor at GMS and a social worker at our high school to better support students' social and emotional needs. To meet the increasing demands within special education, which Dr. Zito will talk about in a few minutes, we are requesting a special education supervisor who will work at the high school, but also work with staff at GMS to support students' needs with individualized programming. After careful consideration of last year's reduction in world language, we are adapting that position to better meet the needs of our evolving multilingual student population by requesting a TESOL teacher for GMS. There are many acronyms in education, and if you are not aware, TESOL is Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. Going forward, the board has committed to continuing conversations about how we can strengthen world language offerings in the future, like many towns around the state that start foreign language at the elementary level. Additional targeted requests include increased support for music with a 0.8 band teacher and a math interventionist at Mosier, a stipend for a STEM club advisor at GMS, and at our high school, a hall monitor, dance team coach, freshman volleyball coach, and a HOSA stipend for a popular club. All of these positions are strategic investments to help foster student success. By increasing staffing and lowering class sizes, we create classrooms that are responsive and equipped to meet students' needs, allowing for more individualized instruction, stronger teacher-student relationships, and timely support of interventions, both academic and behavioral. Equally important, this budget prioritizes programs that enrich and expand student learning. Opportunities in music, athletics, and clubs are not extras. They are essential components of a well-rounded education. Our students deserve these. When a district intentionally provides learning experiences that cultivate the 6 C's, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, citizenship, and character, all while also fostering a strong sense of belonging, research affirms that these experiences are as essential as academic achievement. And while it is true that our district continues to demonstrate strong test scores in the Smarter Balanced State Testing, known as SBAC, and the SAT, we must look at the numbers differently. Our scores overall are above the state average, a celebration for sure. Our district is quite impressive in our district reference group. However, what isn't usually discussed is the SBAC testing showing that about 30% of students taking the math and ELA portions are not proficient. Again, when you look at the SAT data, 45% of students in math and 23% of students in the evidence-based reading and writing portion are not proficient in meeting the state average. Why? Well, these may be students who aren't good test takers. Maybe they struggle with a learning disability. Maybe behavioral or social emotional issues are getting in the way when it comes time for these tests. Whatever the issue, these are areas where our district keeps striving to help students. Dedicated educators are working tirelessly, often under significant pressure. Without proper supports in place, even the strongest systems can become strained. This is just one of the reasons competitive salaries and benefits are critically important. To lose dedicated educators in the district would put us further behind our neighboring districts. Those contracts are negotiated and agreed upon by both parties, and it is essential that we not forget the agreements that are made so that our teachers feel supported. Sustaining excellence requires investment. I'm going to say those words again. Sustaining excellence requires investment. Achievement doesn't happen by chance. It is the result of intentional planning, strong support systems, and access to meaningful opportunities. These are the goals of the Rocky Hill Schools, and this budget reflects that understanding. Public education is not a cost to be minimized. It is the cornerstone of a thriving community. A well-resourced budget allows us to reduce class sizes, strengthen support services for students, expand interventions, and provide programs that ensure every student is seen, supported, and challenged. Alongside the operating budget is the CIP, which outlines necessary capital projects over a 10-year period to maintain town-owned buildings. However, over the past 7 years, the CIP has been underfunded by approximately $7 million. The Board of Education and the community as a whole deserve a clear explanation as to why critical capital improvement projects continue to be underfunded by millions of dollars. The simple fact that the HVAC system at Stevens School still isn't complete is a perfect example of this underfunding. And it started like that from the get-go. Investing in a strong capital improvement plan helps stop the practice of kicking the can down the road by ensuring that necessary repairs and upgrades to town-owned buildings are addressed in a timely, responsible way that protects both safety and long-term costs. Going forward, finishing the HVAC at Stevens is a top priority, along with a school that needs some attention, GMS. With plans for a front entrance canopy, redesigned media center, new tech lab equipped with visual, audio-visual, and green screen technology, and a renovated wood shop. These updated learning spaces would provide students with access to innovative, hands-on educational experiences. Improvements here would ensure that students are actively engaged in learning while building the technical, collaborative, and problem-solving skills necessary for high school and beyond. In closing, I'd like to return to the idea that the education budget is an investment. I hope you understand that the decisions made here today will shape the trajectory of student success. By supporting this budget, you show that you are choosing to invest in students, their potential, and the future of our community. It's time for Rocky Hill to renew its commitment to our public schools. And now I will turn the microphone over to Dr. Zito for his last presentation of the Rocky Hill Public Schools operating budget and CIP.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lafredo. I think those were very appropriate comments and a good lead into our conversation tonight. So appreciate the opportunity to address the council. So when we build our budget every year, we have several basic assumptions. We want to make sure that our budget is aligned with our strategic priorities and reflect our commitment to maintaining high-quality educational programming, effective teaching and learning, ensuring that our learning environments are safe, meaning our schools are clean and safe, and allocating resources responsibly to meet our student needs. Here's some more detail on those budget assumptions. Again, it's focused on educational programming, systematically evaluating existing programs and services, maintaining staffing levels in accordance with Board of Ed class size policies. I know I had a question from a council member. I'll address that specifically tonight when we get to that part of the presentation. Instructional materials are obviously a part of our budget. Many things we use are consumable. We also have technology issues, as you see in number 6, that we try to stay up to speed on technology. And then again, with number 5 there, the facilities. There's an emphasis to make sure everything is safe for students, clean, and attractive. This is a big budget. It's the largest one I've ever brought to you, and we'll talk about that. And I understand the comments that were made earlier, and I understand kind of why there'd be tension about a 9% budget. There are some factors, as Ms. Lafredo alluded to, that are beyond the control of the board. We do have negotiated salary increases. Those are fixed. We're not going to violate those agreements. Just like the council has contracts with bargaining groups, the board does the same thing. We have a significant increase in medical group insurance costs. That is happening across the state. A couple of years ago, you're aware that we switched over from Cigna to the Anthem under the state partnership plan. That was a good move for Rocky Hill because we had a reimbursement come back after that switch for $1.6 million, which is being used to fund the roof without any additional burden on the taxpayers, the roof of West Hill School. So, but insurance, you know, you get that nice payback, and we got a little dip in year 1, but across the state, we're seeing an increase in the cost for the state partnership plan. Transportation is up. That's up 14.5%. Insurance, including new staff, is up 17%. Those are big, big increases. And special education is an area that continues to increase on an annual basis. Costs continue to go up. So there's a lot of drivers in this budget that are beyond the control of the board. As Jess mentioned earlier, pretty much just to maintain what we have, we'd be looking at about a 7.64% budget, just to keep pretty much services intact. Here's another way of looking at the factors which are driving that almost 9% increase. The salaries and benefits alone make up about 7% of that. That does include some new staff as well. There are about 6 positions in this budget that are new. Transportation, as I mentioned earlier, $410,000 increase. That's almost, it's about 3/4 of a point on the budget. You see the increases for tuition, and then the miscellaneous increases, and again, that brings us to an 8.98. Some comments were made about enrollment. This year we are up about 30 kids total. We use the NESDEC projections, and then we do our own counts here. You could see for October 1, 2024, we always use October 1 as the date because that's the apples to apples comparison, and that's the date we report the official information to the state. So for October 1 of 2024, you see the enrollment there, 2532. This fall, we saw an increase of 30 students. We also have 34 students that are homeschooled. We track those kids as well. As I've talked about in prior years, there is a relatively high rate of transiency. I believe some of that is tied to the large amount of apartment homes in Rocky Hill. We're all familiar with the situation this past year at the Concierge, but there are other large apartment complexes as well. And Although our enrollment tends to hover around 2530, 2560, in the 2500 range, when we exclude incoming kindergarten and graduating seniors, we still see large numbers of kids, well over 200 each year, coming in those middle grades between first grade and up to senior year. So they're not leaving the system as seniors, they're not coming in as freshmen, or as kindergarten rather. That's a large number of kids in and out, but it's fairly stable. Those roughly 200-something kids come in and another 200 leave, but that transience does create some challenges as well. But migration overall is enrollment overall is stable. Here is a factor. Mr. Emanuel couldn't be here tonight. He asked me to talk about a little bit on kind of like my perspective of the historical changes in Rocky Hill during the 14 years I've been here. This is one of the data points that's really important about that. If you go back to 2012, we had 231 kids identified with an IEP. We're now over 400. It's come down a little from last year, but still significant, over 400 kids. That's a huge change with a district where enrollment basically stayed the same. If we look at our EL or ML kids, Ms. Lafredo mentioned, a TESOL teacher to work with kids whose primary language is not English. That's a huge increase from 2013 to the fall of 2025. 108 kids up to close to 300. So that is creating additional pressure and challenges on teachers and on building level administration that we didn't see 12 or 13 years ago. The special ed numbers are up 74%. The EL increase, those are the English language learners, primary language is not English, 164% increase. And I was interested in this data, and 49 of those kids are dually identified, meaning they fall into both categories. So now you're talking about students that are identified with special needs and English is not their first language. So these are the kinds of things we're dealing with that we weren't dealing with 10, 12, 14 years ago in Rocky Hill, at least not to this extent. Our enrollment projections call for a decrease. These projections are done by NESDEC. They primarily look at birth rates in town, and they also look at building permits. They're calling for a slight decrease of about 140 kids over a 3-year period. Even if you break that out, even if we stuck to that, that's about 50 kids per year across 13 grade levels, across 5 schools. It's not significant. When I then look at some of the rates of kids coming in, I think we're going to continue to be pretty stable, which has been the pattern here for the last several years. Very stable enrollment, which is a good thing from a budgeting standpoint. When we look at where we are in spending, we pull up the most recent data. You can find this on the state website. They look at per pupil costs per district, for every district in the state. We are in District Reference Group D. These towns all have a similar economic profile. We've slipped back now in the most recent rankings to 19th in spending. So we're sliding. I'll talk a little bit later in the presentation, but we're in the bottom quartile statewide in spending. And I think, a good argument could be made that it would be good for Rocky Hill to move up a little bit in these rankings to stay competitive for a lot of reasons. Test scores are important, but as Ms. Lafredo alluded to, we have a lot of kids that aren't making goal. Other districts may have more kids not making goal, but I don't want to forget about the kids. And I've said for years to our administrators, we're doing well test-wise, but on any metric we look at, somewhere between 25 to 33% of the kids aren't making goal. Again, when we have 75% of the kids on a given metric making goal, that's really good, compares well to other towns. But I think Rocky Hill doesn't want to forget about the kids that aren't making goal as well. I know you guys feel the same way about that. So we look at how we're doing testing-wise. You can see right there in mathematics, these are the most recent results. These are all the grade levels that are tested. We have the highest performance index in the DIRG, #1. And again, you juxtapose that with 19th in spending, it's really good results. The school system continues to produce at a very high level at a very reasonable cost. Again, to compare to the other towns in our district reference group for English language arts, you also see that we're #1 again. Very, very powerful results. That's a testament to the teachers and the people in the building level and the administrators leading them at the building level on how hard they work every day to support the kids in this community. In science, I'm going to tease my friend from East Granby who retired last year. We lost East Granby by 1 in science, so we're number 2 in science. But these are, again, very, very good results. So, again, right at the top in science. Now, in the past years, we've been asked to take a look at District Reference Group B. These towns have a significantly higher median family income. These are towns like Glastonbury, Simsbury, West Hartford, South Windsor. Again, in this ranking, there are 21 districts in this ranking in DIRG B. We don't really look at A because that's really not geographically. Most of the A districts are New Canaan, Darien, just kind of way off the charts economically compared to central Connecticut. But DIRG B does include a lot of towns close to us: Farmington, Glastonbury, Simsbury, West Hartford, Granby, South Windsor. And you can see we're competitive with those towns. We would be 19th in spending, and we're kind of in the thick of it, in the middle there, in math. ELA, again, kind of right in the middle with these districts that are, frankly, where the kids are frankly coming from far wealthier homes compared to Rocky Hill. We're very competitive. Science, we're ahead of Glastonbury, which is remarkable. So, again, we're holding our own even with the towns that have significantly more wealth. And that's important because wealth is correlated positively with student achievement. So to be competitive with these DIRG B towns is something that's important for us to consider. Again, it speaks to the hard work that's going on in the classrooms in Rocky Hill every day. In terms of special ed expenses, for our most recent report we had from the state, we are 4th in terms of efficiency within our district reference group, spending a little over 22.5% of our overall budget going to special ed, and that's good. And some of that is due to the creative in-district programming that we run here in Rocky Hill, because when you start to outplace large numbers of students, those expenses are significant, and they really are a driver on the budget. So the board adopted a budget this year at 8.98%. It's almost a $5 million increase for last year's $55.4 million budget. So you can see the numbers there. They're large. I admit that. I'm not going to deny it. There's no running away from that. Although we are dealing with a lot of the pressures that you're seeing statewide, and there are other districts in our reference group. Shelton, their board approved a budget like 11.4%. South Windsor's board came in at over 8%. So we're seeing some significant numbers in other areas as well. Colchester, 9.76. So we're not alone in this because those fixed costs I talked about earlier are hitting everybody. So we had a question from a council member about staffing. So I want to go through what the new staffing is, and there was a question about offsets as well. So we have a teacher for Stevens School. We need to do that to keep class sizes at the board guidelines or below. We're adding a para-educator to support that position as well at Stevens. We talked a little bit earlier, and I know we've had several questions about the position we're eliminating. We're eliminating the assistant superintendent for personnel and people services. We'd like to see at the central office a director of personnel and performance management, someone to do kind of the traditional human resources work, also mentor principals, and spend time working with some of these issues that have come up through the Voice Committee, like working with diversity initiatives, recruitment, and so forth, things like that, to make sure that every kid in this town feels comfortable coming to school here. Those are important issues. That's a central office position, replacing the one we have. We're not adding another position at the central office. As Ms. Lafredo alluded to, there is a position for a special ed supervisor that will be based at the high school and middle school, and that is an additional administrator. So we're asking for one additional administrator in our budget, but we're not adding another body at the central office. The band teacher, Ms. Lafredo talked about that in her comments too. It will go from a 0.6 up to a 0.8, so there's a slight increase for the band teacher at Mosier School. We have a little help for math intervention there. Again, a day a week essentially is what a 0.2 equates to. Jess also mentioned the ML teacher that's in the budget. We've basically as you saw, we've seen a huge increase in ML numbers. We have one person right now trying to handle a giant caseload between the high school and the middle school, and it's not sufficient. We need to break that up so that the middle school and the high school each have a dedicated teacher to work with those students whose primary language is not English. We also have a guidance counselor scheduled for the middle school. That would be for grade 6. We currently only have 2 counselors at the school. This will provide 1 in each grade level. A social worker for the high school and middle school, and a hall monitor at the high school for student safety issues. The offsets, as I said earlier, are the assistant superintendent. That's about $236,000 offset. Building sub for about $28,000, and a part-time, just a reduction in physical therapy because we're able to consolidate a little bit on some caseloads there at West Hill, and that'll save about $11,000. So the net addition is 6.1 positions. There's a question about class size. I said I would get to it in the presentation here. Right now, as we go into next year, the only change for next year, the kindergarten class size cap will go from 20 down to 18. We think that's important for young learners. I will commend the board for phasing these changes in to minimize the impact on the budget. With this change, the impact is 1 additional teacher. I did some projections for the board earlier in the year, and you'll see that my recommendation was to decrease class size in first grade and wait until the following year, 27, 28. So right now we have 55 elementary teachers. The plan is to go to 56. In the fall of 27, that would bump up to 57 or 58, and the following year probably 1 additional teacher. So over time, we'd be looking to add teachers, but for next year, 1 extra teacher. And I think it was smart and fiscally prudent to adjust those class sizes at those higher grade levels, in other words, 1 through 5, as we move into the following year to minimize the impact on the budget. Just talked about it earlier. Here we are without any new staff. We'd be looking at a 7.64% increase. The new staff, the full cost, including benefits, is about $740,000. It's another way of looking at those numbers through a pie chart, and it just jumps out at you. And this is consistent with any school district in the state, probably nationally. It's a people-intensive business, so your salaries and benefits are running about 82 to 83%, and that's pretty standard, and that's been the same for about 14 years. Here is how it breaks out. Again, that pie chart, we just break it out for you numerically. You can see salaries and benefits, 82.39%. Transportation, a little over 5%. Tuition, just under 3%. And then the rest of it falls out with supplies and all the other things that we have to do to keep the school system running effectively for the kids. But again, the lion's share is salaries, benefits, and then transportation takes up a big chunk too. But it's important to bus those kids safely to and from school every day. So this is kind of a thought exercise we do every year. What would we look like based on those rankings if we simply came up to the median for the district reference group, for the where they are in terms of mean per pupil spending? We'd increase that budget by $5.4 million. This is going back to 24-25, and just to come up to the state average, it would be a $9 million increase for Rocky Hill. And this is important to think about because this town is in the top 46% in the ANGLIC rankings, which is the measure of relative wealth that the school districts use to just determine how wealthy is the town, what is the ability of Rocky Hill to pay for services for not only schools but also municipal services. And Rocky Hill is kind of an average, middle of the road, Connecticut town in the top 46% statewide. There's 169 towns in the state. There's 166 districts in the state, and we rank 126th in spending. So we spend in the bottom quartile, which is not necessarily a terrible thing, but I could make a very strong argument, I will make an argument, that a 9% budget, given where we are right now, is certainly not out of line, and there's some good news coming along the way that I'm going to touch upon later on today as well. So I will credit Mayor Smith for asking me what a 9% budget would do if we made some assumptions about other districts. So where would we fall on the ranking of 24 if everybody else got a 4%? And we'd still be 16th. And that doesn't really change with 3, because 3% is about $200 on this chart. And that's a very conservative projection, because a lot of these towns, as I said earlier, are coming in at 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 in one place. So we're not going to see 3% across the board. But even with 3 or 4% across the board, Rocky Hill is still going to rank 16th in spending. So the point I'm trying to illustrate here is this is not some outrageous system here that's eating up all the resources in town. It's a well-run system. The costs are maintained at a reasonable level every year, and education is expensive. But other things in life are expensive too, and you have to pay for quality, so that's important. When we talk about our capital improvement program history, Ms. Lafredo alluded to this earlier. For a while, and I do have the historical perspective here, the town was doing a pretty good job. If you look back 2015, 16, 16, 17, pretty close to what the board was requesting. And then 21, 22, it just really started to tail off. And like I said earlier, the only reason that the funding's in place for the West Hill roof is because we had that unanticipated windfall from the closeout with Cigna when we moved over to Anthem. So that's something to think about. Why is this shortfall occurring each year? And it's important because schools are town assets. They're not simply, I've never looked at this personally as an us versus them. I think the town is very deliberate about electing you to office and electing the board officers. You elected officials, in my view, here historically have done a great job kind of working together. There's always a little tension at budget time, but these are important assets. West Hill Roof, for example, a few years ago was experiencing leaks, and we had to address those on a fairly regular basis, and sometimes these things get a little expensive, and you wouldn't tolerate that in your own house, and residents tell us we shouldn't tolerate it for our students either. These are things that need to be addressed. The tennis courts, for example, they cannot be resurfaced again. Those are a town asset. Some of our residents enjoy using them. Our high school kids need them for physical education and for competitive tennis. They're in disrepair. That's going to be $1 million. At some point, that has to be addressed fiscally. And as Jess said, we can't continue to kick the can down the road. So here's what we have for pending infrastructure projects. We're still kind of about halfway through the work at Stevens School, so there's roughly another $3 million worth of work that needs to be done. That school, which was built in 1957, is also desperately in need of new doors and windows. The West Hill roof, the funding's in place. We're still waiting for final approval from the state, but we've turned in the paperwork. We're just waiting for the kind of the machinery of state government to get to where it gets to and then give us the green light. I am not optimistic it's going to happen this summer, and I just want to be clear about that because of the delays with the state. It's not a delay on our end. We've turned our paperwork in on time. They're moving at a fairly slow pace over there. But the funding's in place, so that job will get done. The GMS front canopy is an eyesore, not the most attractive thing we see in town. That eventually needs to be replaced. It's about $800,000. There's a planned renovation of the media and center, which is basically the library and the tech ed classrooms at GMS, $3 million. The tennis courts I just mentioned. The bleachers are about $140,000. We've had complaints over the years that we don't have bleachers. The history there is we had to remove the bleachers because the building department deemed them a safety hazard. Those of you that have been around, I know Dave's been going to football games for years. Those bleachers were in rough shape, so we had to take them down. Not the ones on the home side. This is the visitor side bleachers. And then the high school requires some masonry. We call it pointing around the building envelope. And there's some work that should be done in the West Hill Library as well. So my understanding preliminarily is there might be some funding in state legislature specifically as a carve-out for the West Hill Library, about $80,000, which would be good. So that's a lot of capital work that's facing the town over the next several years. So why is it important to fund the CIP? Well, as I said earlier, it protects assets. These are town assets. These are town properties. They should be maintained to the highest standards. And we want to avoid emergencies. Sometimes an emergency can be very expensive versus having a detailed, systematic, planned repair process. Again, if you have buildings that are functional that don't have breakdowns, you can stabilize your budgeting. You also can extend the useful life of facilities, and again, safety and compliance are important issues as well. And finally, it strengthens public trust. You know, there's a benefit to the visibility of tax dollars when you think about gleaming, new, beautiful schools. Mosier constantly get compliments about how beautiful Mosier is, what a great job the entire town did pulling together for that referendum, council and board working hand in hand to push that through. And we have a beautiful intermediate school, and we're very lucky to have that. So, and that gets feedback, and that generates positivity, and people feel like, hey, my tax dollars are going into a positive place. And I will commend both the council and the board, because when I came to this district in 2012, the facilities were in abysmal shape. Stevens School had a hole in the floor of the gym. Not exaggerating, you could drop a softball through it, probably a basketball would fit through the hole. The PE teacher, Mr. Gilbert, used to put orange cones around the hole on the gym floor. That doesn't happen anymore, and that's a credit to the council and the board for working hard over the years to upgrade the facilities, but that doesn't mean that momentum can stop. So in our capital improvement budget, you see the classroom space at West Hill. I talked about that earlier. I believe there's some carve out in the legislation I saw for that. The high school tech ed and media center, the tennis courts, very important, are very much a shared resource. The visitors bleachers at McVicker, classroom furniture, which does need to be replaced. GMS is in pretty rough shape. We need to get some new classroom furniture in there. And then some smaller repair projects throughout the district for a total of $1.7 million. So always good to remind everybody about why we're here. It's all about students and student achievement at the end of the day. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. We've had a very good season athletically in Rocky Hill. We've had all-state athletes in boys cross country, ice hockey, and girls basketball. Our girls soccer team made the state semifinals. In cross country, we had an individual student runner-up. He was champion the year before, finished runner-up this past season. Our girls basketball team had an unprecedented season for Rocky Hill, going all the way to the state finals, losing in overtime. Great run by those girls, very exciting for the community. Our hockey squad was very good as well. They, along with the girls basketball team, were South Division champs in the CCC. Marching band continues to be successful. They've moved up in class. They are now a Class 3 marching band, and they took first place in 3 local shows and third place in New England. So we're really proud of those kids. And those are again, a nice thing we offer in the school system, I would say essential to keep kids engaged in the learning process. The research is clear that when kids are engaged in extracurricular activities, involved in a sport, involved in band, their student achievement is better. Particularly with teenage kids, idle time is usually not a good thing, so we want them to stay busy. Academic excellence, we talked about test scores. West Hill again, I think for the 6th time, achieved the Connecticut School of Distinction. Top 10% in the state for academic growth and performance, with 95 or greater % of the kids participating in the tests, and no gaps between high needs students and students without high needs. And then finally, and thank you to the mayor for featuring on the local show, Jordan Shigell, our tech ed teacher who runs the Career Center at the high school. That's a relatively new board initiative, and that has gotten off to an amazing start, really helping kids focus on their next step when they leave Rocky Hill. We continue to have a very high graduation rate. That's a 4-year cohort rate of 95%, compared to the state's high school graduation rate for 4 years, which is about 89%. And you can see, I just picked a bunch of schools that the guidance department sent me that we have basically kids competing at a national level for schools all over the country. We also see international students. This year, 2 kids have been accepted to Harvard, and another kid's been accepted to Yale, actually the same girl, Harvard and Yale. So really proud of the work that they do at the high school to prepare these kids, but it starts in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten and goes all the way up. So overall budget summary, again, we're requesting a $60,475,000 budget. It's almost a $5 million increase, and it's about 9%. Here are some of the questions I received from various council members, and I took some liberties. I just kind of paraphrased the questions to speed it up here. But the question is, the schools produce good results while spending less on a per-pupil basis than most comparable districts. What specific data points show that a large spending increase is needed? Are there indicators such as teacher retention, class size, or compensation competitiveness suggesting that our performance is at risk? And the answer really is no. The large budget, as I said earlier, is primarily due to factors beyond the immediate control of the board. So the salary increases and the spikes in health insurance, transportation, and special ed are really the main drivers. We would be at 7.64 just to maintain basically current services. Another question from a council member was, how many positions are not funded or eliminated when compared to your current budget? And I talked about that earlier, but you have the numbers there. We reduced the assistant superintendent for personnel and pupil services. That's $236,000. That includes the benefits. The sub at the high school, the part-time position with physical therapy. And we also have an offset of about $50,000 for a retired elementary teacher. We make an assumption that we're going to hire a teacher at a lower salary level. So we made reductions for staffing of about $327,000. Another question about transferring. I gave you two very specific examples. We will need another fifth grade teacher at Moser next year, and we will need another special ed teacher at GMS because we will have more students with IEPs. The caseload there goes from about 63 to 77. So in both those cases, we're doing internal district transfers. There's no new staffing that's being requested for those positions. Mr. Emanuel couldn't be here. He asked about busing, and so I've got some detail here. We maintain a fleet of 19 buses. One of them is assigned to the Vinyl Tech Run, which we have to do by state law. We combine the high school and the middle school on the first run, Moser on the second run, and then the fleet splits off with 10 buses going to West Hill and 8 to Stevens. The Moser buses, since we're servicing all the kids with 18 buses, tend to have a little bit lower numbers. But if we started to pull buses out of the fleet to try to drop to 17 or 16, we would run into some issues, particularly with those Stevens and West Hill runs. A lot of times I do get complaints, hey, those buses are never full, and that is true. We also get complaints about traffic on Bailey Road all the time, and traffic in front of Stevens School on Orchard Street. We're seeing more and more parents drop off and pick up, but that doesn't mean that we can rely on them to do that every day. So we have to have seats for those kids. We also know that high school students drive their own vehicles, and sometimes they park around the school, as we've dealt with recently as well, Carroll Drive and other areas, and I know the town is addressing that. And then particularly like during spring sports where a lot of kids are running track, you'll see even fewer kids on buses. So I acknowledge that the busing, the ridership numbers can fluctuate based on weather conditions, sports schedules, and things like that. But we do have to assign a bus to every kid who's eligible for a bus, which is very few kids are designated as walkers. So the vast majority of kids need to be assigned to a bus in case mom or dad decides to put them on a bus on any given day. And I also worry that if we reduce the fleet size, it would likely increase the time on the bus. And then there'd be complaints on the flip side of now my kid is getting home 10 minutes later than he was before because you went from 18 buses down to 16, and now it's another 10 minutes on the bus for my kid. So we're pretty happy with New Britain Transportation. Their contract came in at 14.5%, but the competitor who offered a bid was over 30%. So we went with a responsible low bidder. I would not recommend tinkering with the bus fleet. Mr. Emanuel also kind of asked me to talk a little bit about kind of my view historically, what's been going on in the town over the last 14 years, and just a couple of achievements. And again, this is a team effort. This is not about me at all. It's just kind of data-driven, and these are things that, with everybody working together, some achievements for the district. In 2011, 2012, the CAPT and the CMT, we had different testing metrics back then. We now use the SBAC and the SAT, but the Connecticut Academic Performance Test was a 10th grade test, and the Connecticut Mastery Tests were at the elementary level. District achievement was average in the DIRG. It's right around average in most metrics we looked at, not at the top, not at the bottom, pretty much hovering around the average in most instances on a district-wide level. And you could see where it started to creep up. By 2016, 17, on the SBAC, for example, we were 7th in the district reference group in math and 4th in English language arts. As you saw earlier, we're now pretty much at the top. So I give the staff all the credit for that. There's been a good increase in achievement over time. The implementation of full day K was a big issue for this town, and it was important to get that in place. We have an SRO program that didn't exist, largely, I think, as a result of what happened with Sandy Hook and then the Boston Marathon. And thankfully, we have those officers, and that is something that I will always be grateful for the council for funding those police officers in our schools. They keep our kids safe, and they deter anybody with a bad idea about coming into the building. I hope that continues to remain the same. We've seen a dramatic expansion of special ed programming to meet the changing needs of our community. And again, I talked about the facilities initiatives. The schools are now in beautiful condition. They still need work. I don't want to lose sight of that, but Ron and his staff do a great job keeping them attractive. Mosher School is an award-winning school, and the high school renovation was a successful project as well. So let's see. All right, a couple more slides. Some good news. I want to thank the mayor and the board chair for asking me to go to the fire station, Station 3 last week. Ray, thank you for the invitation. We got some very good news from the governor. He announced that day. What I heard from the governor and what I heard the mayor also reiterating is that the state legislature and the governor understand the pressure that towns are under. So last year, the ECS amount, that's Educational Cost Sharing Grant to the town of Rocky Hill, was $8.5 million. This year, it's projected to go to $9.2 with additional supplemental funding of $1.2 million. That's huge. And if you look at some of the other surrounding communities, their grant in the report that just came out is a lot lower. I think Cromwell's maybe $480,000, something like that. So the $1.2 million is great news for Rocky Hill. In addition to that, my understanding is you're getting almost $500,000 in supplemental municipal aid. That's for the town side. So that should help to alleviate some of the concerns that were expressed earlier from residents about mill rate, taxes, and so forth. That's a big step for the state. And, you know, in my view, it comes at the right time with the needs that we're facing in this community. So with that being said, I just want to finish with thanking you for allowing me to present tonight. This is, again, we think a high-quality school system at a below-average cost with great results. Our board's budget is student-centered and needs-focused, and I think you know, long-term stability is a hallmark of this community, and I'd like to see it continue. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions that I didn't cover in the presentation.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you for all of that, Dr. Zito. I'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to ask some questions. I see everybody deep in thought. So also just thanks to all the other administrators in the room too, Dr. Nozick, who probably prepares a lot of these figures. I see some principals and other administrators and most of the Board of Ed, past and present. So thank all you guys for coming as well.
I have a couple questions. Thank you so much for your tenure here, by the way, Dr. Zito. That presentation was so good that I almost forgot some of the questions I had as you were talking. But I have written down my notes, so it's chicken scratch at best. What was the reason, you mentioned reduced class size mandates,
Yeah.
You said the state reduced their
No.
mandates too, or?
No, the state did not reduce class size. The Board of Education reduced our class size guidelines by 2 students next year for kindergarten.
Right.
And then, so it goes from 20 to 18. And then in the following year, in the fall of 2027, 2 more students at each grade level per classroom in grades 1 through 5.
And then, and I saw that stop after 27, 28 on the
Yeah.
the chart.
Yeah.
What happens like down the road? Does that mean 2 to 7 and 8, 2 to?
No, well, that's up to the board, but I think it would stay there. That strikes me as reasonable. So right now,
And is that because
Yeah, let me
I
bring
see
it-
a little bit less enrollment at the higher grades than I see in the elementary to
no,
8th?
well, the enrollment slide the enrollment guideline is 25 for the upper grades, so that hasn't changed. So that's what
Okay.
you're referring to. So,
That's ours, not the state's.
correct, this is not, there is no kind of state formula for this. This
Okay.
is, I think Ms. Lafredo alluded to this earlier, we kind of look at surrounding districts, see where they are. The feeling was, this year, for example, we had some kindergarten classes that were 21 students, the cap was 20, and they were concerned that,
So we
21.
exceeded the cap, our
Yeah, we did
own
in a couple of
imposed cap.
spaces, we did this year, yeah. So we'd like to move it to 18 for next year. That's an intense day, when you're dealing with 18 5-year-olds. I joke with people, think about if you have 3 kids, taking them somewhere,
Yeah, it's an impossible.
and managing 3. So now you're managing 18
Yeah.
throughout the day. It's tough to take 3 kids to Burger King, so, 18 kids is a lot. So I don't think this was dramatic to reduce by 2. So at each one of those levels where you see K through 5, you could see that it was, we went down by 2. So we're in 18 for kindergarten next year, we were at 20. And then you see the following year, first grade will drop from 20 to 18. Second and third grade will drop from 22 to 20. And the fourth and fifth grade will drop from 25 to 23. No change at the secondary level.
And what was the average in those classes? Again, this is me just gathering information. So for example, we had one class of 21, but what were some of the other kindergarten classes?
So at West Hill, we were looking at like 17s and 18s. At Stevens, we were a little higher this year in kindergarten. I actually have some information here.
Oops, in this book.
So next year, we are projecting West Hill School will have kindergartens of 17.4, first grade just about 20, second grade 18, and third grade 18. Stevens, again, we don't have, we have averages here, so 17.5 in kindergarten, 20 in first grade, 20 in second grade, 18 in third grade. So we work really hard to stick to the
pretty
guidelines.
balanced,
We've
too.
never been dramatically over. We were over the guidelines in a couple of spots this year, and that has happened in the past as well. But the board had, they had a policy meeting, and it's within their discretion to set those guidelines, and they've dropped them by 2, which is a modest change. It's not dramatic. They didn't drop the class size to 10 or 11 kids. They
Well, it
dropped
sounds
it
like
by
you're
2.
kind of getting to the average anyways, because you were slightly
We-
below.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but so for example, adding the teacher at Stevens, we're going from 55 to 56 teachers at the elementary level district-wide. Adding that teacher at Stevens allows that number to come down. We're projecting 105 kids in kindergarten. So if we only had 5 sections next year at Stevens School,
You'd be over
we'd be over
21.
20, exactly. So the 6th teacher there brings it down to 17.5.
Thank you. Do we have, my kids have been out for a few years now, but have we instituted pay to play at all?
No, and that, again, I have the advantage of the historical perspective. The board has always felt strongly that that's not, going back to when Mr. McDonald was the board chair, and then Mr. Morse, Mr. Dillon.
Yep.
This board, unlike others, has never looked at pay for play because, and I would agree with that, I think it's an essential part of the educational experience for kids. The only pay to play is the out-of-district kids who play ice hockey. We do have a fee that those boards have to pay us to support the ice hockey program because we have a co-op for ice hockey.
Yeah.
So if I'm a Middletown kid playing for Rocky Hill, my board has to pay.
So do area towns do that? Do you
Some
know?
do, I know, I mean, going back years ago, when I was a parent, in Glastonbury, my stepkids, it was pay to play back then.
Yeah.
On a per sport basis. But the strong feeling here from the board has been, it's really part of the educational program, and parents are paying taxes, so to tell a family, all right, now you've got to pay another $200 to play football in the fall or girls' basketball, I think there'd be some pushback. Berlin tried to institute parking fees for students, and it became pretty crazy, so I'm not sure that would be well received.
The addition of a guidance counselor at GMS, do we not have a guidance counselor there now, or is that an additional add?
It's one, so we have 2 counselors now. They're covering the entire school. The idea is that we would be able to have a counselor in grade 6, 7, and 8, so one for each grade level. We have about 200 kids per grade level at Stevens, or at GMS rather, but what we are seeing, Dave, is more of some of these social issues that are more pronounced than they were, say, 10 or 12 years ago. Online stuff going on, kids coming in, low self-esteem, social emotional health issues, basically. So the feeling is that adding the extra counselor would be very helpful for the kids at the school.
So do we have 3 at the high school too, 1 per grade?
We have 4 at the high school.
Okay. So it'd be consistent from GMS all the way
Yeah,
up
it would be
through.
consistent, yeah. Although, at the high school, they do an alphabetized grade level, so they typically stay with the kids for 4 years, but they basically divide the kids up into 4 groups.
Okay, yeah. Special ed supervisor?
Yeah.
We bring somebody in to be a supervisor, which is one of your ads. Who does that responsibility now?
So right now, we have, the position we're eliminating has some oversight of special ed and oversees the director of special ed.
That's the assistant supervisor we're
Correct. The
eliminating?
assistant superintendent position is being eliminated. The director of special ed would be the top line person in special ed and would have a supervisor working under that position directly at the middle school and high school, handling all the IEP meetings, helping supervise the staff in special ed, hiring the paraprofessionals, dealing with a whole range of issues that have to do with special ed. We have that model right now at the elementary schools.
We do.
Yeah, we have, the assistant principals at the elementary school have some oversight for special education. The issue is at the middle school and the high school, the assistant principals are flat out with everything they're doing. They're larger schools, so they don't have the time in their day to supervise special ed.
Okay. And the social work would be going back and forth between Rocky Hill High
Yeah,
School
it's a
and
split
GMS?
position plan for the high school and middle school.
Is that part of the thing you were just mentioning about the guidance counselor ad, is because we have more social issues facing?
Yeah, it's related. Yeah, we're seeing more behavior issues. We're frankly seeing more kids coming from issues, where there's poverty in the home and things like that. We've seen quite a bit of a change over the last few years, and we're just seeing more issues. I think it's pretty consistent statewide, too. I don't think it's isolated to Rocky Hill.
Between you and the Board of Ed, have we considered a referendum question for some of these capital improvements? I mean, it seemed like a fairly detailed list that could be consolidated in a referendum.
That's always at the discretion of the town to open that conversation with the board. As you know, that's a process that you have to prepare with the state. It has to go onto the ballot. There's steps. And that's certainly something, I don't think, in my view, and this is just my opinion, after the successful referendum for the high school and for Mosier, which was in 2016, I don't know if there was an appetite in town, at least historically, to do another referendum for facilities projects. So we, on the board, speaking for the board, they've been attempting to address them on a kind of more of a piecemeal basis. Certainly within the purview of the town to do a town referendum. You see them in every town, usually during elections, and there's a whole process, and you'd involve your town attorney to do the questions properly and put them on the ballot, but that's certainly something that you could certainly consider. But that would also really require council involvement in that. It's not just something the board has the authority to put a referendum question up.
Yeah, I guess my intention is involving the citizens,
Yeah.
input on that too.
Yeah,
Direct
100%.
input versus, just our input,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, and then, I'm sure I'll have a few more other questions as maybe questions arise from the other council members, but again, I can't say enough. You've been great for the town, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
You know that.
I have some questions. Hi, Dr. Zito, thank you again for your time in town. I have an 8 and 9-year-old who live in town, and I have gone through the 504 meetings and all of that and understand the amount of time and stress that goes to that and the Rocky Hill team that is involved with that. So I can acknowledge, and I know at least, I'm not even going to name a number, but many other kids in town that need the same services, if not more. So I can acknowledge that there's a very much increased, special ed and social and other types of services that are needed. I'm sure not just in town, but around the state and probably around the United States. I also wanted to go back to class size. I know you spend a lot of time on kindergarten, which, young kids, but again, a lot of the kids around my children's age also are a lot to handle when they're having social and mental issues and other things. And my understanding, like the Moser School and some of the other schools are pretty much maxed out on their class sizes. I don't think you've spoke to that. I just kind of wanted to.
Now, Moser, I mean, they're close, so right now, for next year, we're projecting 23.6 kids in fourth grade, 24 in fifth grade. The cap for next year is 25 at Moser, so they're close, but we're not over. And understand that I would, love to have lower class sizes each year, and I would have done that every year, but I also have a financial obligation to be fiscally responsible, and I think I've done a pretty good job over the years of sticking with the board's guideline as my indicator on how the schools get staffed. So we've been pretty good about fidelity with those guidelines.
Okay.
I think to your point, though, Ms. Kaplan, that's one reason why the board is looking to decrease class sizes in 2 years for that age group at Moser, going from 25 down to 23.
Yeah, I wanted to just acknowledge that, so, and say, I agree with reducing class sizes where possible, and to help not just kids, but the teachers' mental health as well. Also, my other question has to do with grants, pursuing grants, the tennis courts. There are definitely grants that can be achieved for the tennis courts through STEEP, USTA, and other small grants. You could get, almost up to $750,000, $900,000 or more, very, very successfully. I think Shelton recently got a STEEP grant for their tennis courts. So I don't know if that's taken into account if someone is able to work on grants to do that.
Yeah,
would like
that's
to
actually a
pursue
great
that.
point, and Mr. Lamontagne is here. We did start to look at USTA grants, and the STEEP grant is a great idea, though. That's something that we could look at through the state as well.
Yeah, there's some other ones too that I suggest that could help, reduce some of those
Thank
costs.
you. No, that's a great
Yeah.
comment, and I know you've done a little work on that, Mr. Lamontagne. So
Thank
we'll
you.
see what we can find on that, but thank you.
And then I do want to speak on that, and I acknowledge that the majority of this budget is due to things that are out of control. And the things that are not necessarily out of control are some essential services that were cut previously. Language and summer schools and things like that, that I don't think was really spoken to in this. So I wanted to also just mention that. I don't know if you want to speak to
I
that.
can give you the
Yeah.
exact numbers on that.
Okay,
So
thank you.
last year, we had an adopted budget of 4.87, and it came in at 3.6, so it was about a $650,000 reduction. We pride ourselves, at least our administrative team at the central office, we've never had to lay anybody off, but I did have to do some transfers. Ms. Lafredo alluded to losing the elementary position that we're trying to restore to get that class size back to a little bit lower level at Stevens. The world language program did go away, and the summer programming that is enrichment programming, it's not optional. For years, the town ran a celebrations program, and I want to be clear about that. The legal obligation for extended school year for students with IEPs remains, and we will continue to fund that program. But the summer programming was one of the things also as a result of that reduction. Now, again, in fairness, it was still a 3.6% increase, but it was a reduction of $650,000 that the board had requested that frankly, I felt the 487 was a reasonable budget number last year.
Yeah. And it is unfortunate that the people that spoke earlier about this bill or about this budget left and
might be
can't
watching us.
hear that. So I'm hoping they're watching. Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
I'm just kind of picking up on the languages for the intermediate school. So you have fifth graders who had language in fourth grade,
Right,
and they're not getting it this year.
right.
Will that negatively impact them going into sixth grade? I don't know, or is it just,
I mean, that
Is it more
that's
enrichment?
kind of a subjective question. I would say yes, because they're going to, now, sixth grade is still an introductory level for languages. They basically get, we have 4 academic marking periods. They essentially get a quarter of Spanish and a quarter of French. It's kind of an intro. So the design initially went, because there was a board objective years ago, it was a board goal to bring world languages into the lower grades. So when Mosher was built, it was part of the academic program. But the intent in grades 4, 5, and 6 basically is to expose kids to other cultures, expose them to different languages, specifically French and Spanish, to generate a little bit of excitement, even in grade 6. And then in 7th grade is the first year where they choose a full year of a world language. And that's where they make a choice between Spanish or French. They go into high school, we had a third language, which is Italian. Latin, rather. We tried Italian. We had 4 at one point. Italian didn't work out numbers-wise, but Latin's been stable. So you could argue it's a negative, but again, given all the needs the board had, the board thought that dealing with those kids in the English language learner target population was a little more of our priority right now than reinstating world language to Mosher. And again, that was an effort to try to keep the number reasonable. You know, you add another staff member, we're up another $113,000.
And is that, how many kids take languages? Is that a requirement, or is that?
Yeah,
a-
the state requires some level of world language. I think they require a couple years. Most colleges require 3 years at
I'm
least.
talking about for the
No,
fourth
it's
and
not,
fifth
it's not a
grade.
required course, and that's a great question. It's not world language is not required until you get to high school. It's not even required at the middle school by state. However, it's been here as long as I've been here. It's been here way before I came, and I think it's very important to give kids an advantage as they head into high school. So I would really be against any more eliminations of world language.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
a great thing, because I know from my son, he's been out a while, but
Yeah.
from having it in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, he was able to take UConn French,
Yeah.
and he went in with, you know, he
Yeah.
didn't have a language requirement. He's a science major, so he didn't have a language requirement because he satisfied it. So it is very beneficial.
Yeah.
Dr. Zito, thank you for a great presentation. I'm going to apologize to everybody in the room at first by saying I'm on a bit of a bender with the legislative session ending, so I'm a little exhausted, but I have a lot to say and a lot that I want to be thankful for you and everybody in here for what you're doing. First of all, thank you for your tenure of service here. I think somebody said 2012 is when you started as the superintendent.
Yeah.
That is a piece of our history here, and it's so many adaptations from where the system was then to now. You've been an excellent steward of our education system for our students, and it shows in the outcomes. It shows in that per pupil spending versus outcomes, which I will get to again in a moment, because it shows it, but we shouldn't be exposing it so much. School, public education is a primary good in our society. In the century plus that it's been a part of our culture and society here, has frankly become a critical part of the social contract. And for many, many, many kids, it is the only place where they get access to experiences in life that are sometimes out of the reach of their parents, out of the reach of their neighborhoods and their social nets that they have. So when we start to get into nickel and diming education, I might be a little bit forward in this. It's sometimes offensive to me, because it is the social contract that every generation makes to the next one. You have, it seems over recent years, done an excellent job of balancing the intentions and needs of the town itself in terms of budget and what you hope to achieve. And this ask is the largest you've ever made. But I haven't seen anything in it, frankly, that I see as egregious or not part of what would be stabilizing the future of the school system. I'm definitely not speaking for everyone on this dais when I say that, but I personally would love to see us produce a budget that is right there with what you're asking. There's a lot of things that were talked about tonight. Class sizes. We should be having this goal of reducing our class sizes down to what the science and the data say work. I'm the product of excellent special education. I've said that several times in public. I hope it will become something you just know me by. You know, I was very lucky in high school. I went to a boarding school. My parents spent all they had to get me into that. Class sizes were sometimes as low as 6. That is an irreplaceable type of educational situation to have. So 18 seems to me like a bare minimum place to be. World languages. I had access to French when I was young, 1st to 5th grade. I became pretty fluent, was able to converse with French speakers quite a bit. Didn't have access in middle school when I moved, didn't have access in the first couple of years of high school even. I don't speak any foreign languages now. It matters that you get to kids young with the access to it and that it's consistent through all of schooling. So trying to get there with the starting point of world languages is a good start, but I see a future with a long-term need, to focus on it. Other things that matter, the kicking cans down the road, infrastructure spending. You know, I'm open to whatever process we want to look at towards investing in the infrastructure of our schools, whether it's referendum or through budget over time. I can appreciate why we would take the latter approach where we can, but we do need to invest in the infrastructure, just like we need to invest in our town. There's a lot of pressures that are building in the world around us. And when it really comes down to it, it's going to be, you know, if things start to fall apart outside of here, it's us in this town, this community. What do we choose to do with our money? What do we choose to do with our resources? I can't think of anything better to do with it than invest in a stable future for it. What else did I have here? You said special ed students have increased 74% over
Yes.
the course of that time. That's an incredible rise. In conversations with the mayor recently, we were talking about how the quality of our special education is such and continues to grow to the point where we might start to see outplacement students from other communities into our community's special ed programs. I want to say to the public that if that happens, we're increasing the amount of money that we receive here in town from outside for education. I would love for that to be the case. I would love for people to look at this community as a safe, perfect place to raise a child who has needs that are beyond the norm. There's not a lot of those places, and Rocky Hill could be one of them. Lastly, I do want to say thank you to Chair Jess Lafredo, members of the Board of Ed who are here tonight and who are not, teachers and staff at the schools especially, every single one of them. That school I talked about that I went to with like the low class sizes, every single staffer was involved in kids' lives. I can imagine that's the case here at our schools. So the things you're doing are great. I wanted to finish by talking about that whole notion of we have seen the quality of the outcome in the low per pupil spending versus outcomes. But we are relying right now, and you're leaving us, by the way, we're relying on the endurance, the intentionality, the frank, extreme dedication to the craft that the individual people who are in roles right now carry with them. And we have no guarantees on who the next people will be and whether they'll carry the same level of dedication. That's why you resource these things such that that's not what you're relying on forever. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done for this town. You've built the foundation of my child's education, and she's not even in it yet. Thank you for everything you've done.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Zito, for coming in tonight, and congratulations on your retirement. Thank you for all the years of service, and I've been proud to work with you the last couple.
Thank you.
So thank you. A couple things about the budget. We have class size up on your screen. When was that changed, these numbers?
Very recently, I'd say about 2 months ago. Conversations were going on throughout the year, but the policy was adopted a couple of months ago.
With these reductions, are we worried about our buildings to physically house these children? Are we going to be needing new classrooms? Are we going to be needing new schools?
No, I'm not concerned about that. We have, right now, there are 55 elementary teachers. We'll go to 56 next year. One extra teacher at Stevens. There's space for
But
that.
is there space for that?
Following year, it adds another 2 teachers, so there's capacity. Mosier, for example, has 17 classrooms that are staffed right now. There's 24 rooms in the building, so there's ample space there. So I'm not overly concerned. The tightest footprint at the elementary level is at Stevens, but we'll get to where we need to with the numbers, and the enrollment has been stable, so I don't anticipate a problem there. If something crazy happened down the road, the board could look at space at Mosier. We have done that historically. When enrollment was really spiking, before Mosier was built, we implemented what I called the fifth grade option at GMS. So when enrollment was really tight, one year at the elementary schools, for a couple years, we had fifth graders going to GMS. In fact, one of the teachers is smiling because I knew she'd think about that, but Michelle Walerziak was at Stevens, and she was the pioneer of the fifth grade option and took a bunch of fifth graders to GMS, and she's still there, but now she's graduated to grade 6. So the point is, the board has the statutory authority to look at all available space and accommodate kids and move grade levels if needed, change neighborhoods if needed. It's not a pleasant thing to have to do, but the fifth grade option was voluntary and it worked out pretty well.
That is a concern. I just want to see us run out of,
Yeah, I think you have enough
Space.
space at Mosier. I don't think you're gonna run out of space, because even if you had to move some third graders to Mosier, even a couple of classrooms, it would work. We have great staff here, so that's not a concern as far as I'm concerned.
great. You're losing one superintendent, but you're creating 2 positions to
Yeah.
take over that one position.
Right, we're dividing
that?
the special ed responsibilities and putting a person at the building level to support directly with students and teachers in the building. We're not adding any new staff at central office, we're changing some responsibilities.
Well, you're actually adding an extra position for one person.
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's an extra administrator, but it's a school-based, not central office. I just want to be clear about that. The resources are going into the school.
I know, but I understand you're just moving a position, but it's.
It is an
you're
additional
creating
administrator. It's an additional administrator.
2 people, yeah, to create, for
It's
that
a-
was
it's
doing
a-
one job.
So that position was a product of what was going on during COVID. It's an unusual portfolio for a person to have primary oversight for personnel and special education. Those are 2 very dynamic areas. The thought was to be more consistent with other districts and streamline it to more of a traditional kind of personnel management, HR, hiring, staffing, FMLA concerns, staff discipline. Remember, we have about 470 staff members. They're not all teachers. There's a lot that goes on with each bargaining unit, contract negotiation. And to take the special ed off the plate there, also reducing the salary slightly just to focus on primarily human resources, and add some special ed support at the building level. So that's the design. It does put an extra person into the schools. I addressed those numbers earlier. You know, when I came here, we had 230 kids with an IEP. It's an individual education plan for special ed. We have over 400 now. The needs are intense, and we continue to see more intensity in special ed as well in terms of kids that require one-to-one assistance, kids with significant emotional and behavioral challenges. I mean, the needs they're increasing, they're not diminishing.
Why was it this year you decided to do that? Not last year or the year before even?
So what happened was last year, we had a person in that position leave
Okay.
and go to another state, and we have an interim person in the role. And the board had the conversation last spring, and my comment to the board was, you don't have the funding right now. We should put a person in as a placeholder and properly work through the budget process to get to the place the board wanted to. So they followed my advice, and they worked through and put it into this year's budget. I've always been very, sometimes the principals aren't thrilled with me when I say we don't try to add stuff that we don't need to after the budget. The budget, the door's closed, it's been appropriated, this is what we have. So we worked through the budget process this year.
Great. Could you go to the capital improvement screen? that
Yeah.
We had up there.
Let's see.
We talked about some state funding coming. Do you know what that's going to be earmarked for? Is it for
So-
capital improvements or? is
Okay,
it-
so the state funding is, that I talked about was what Governor Lamont talked about the other day.
Correct.
It's a supplemental educational cost-sharing grant, and Rocky Hill is slated to receive an additional $1.2 million. The town is also slated to receive another $471 in municipal aid. I don't know the particulars, if that money can be earmarked for facilities. I don't know the answer. Someone else may.
Okay.
I don't know right now. Maybe Mr. Van Looney does.
Digging in at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this is
But
all, this
there's-
came out Thursday.
Yes, yes.
I'm just digging into, I dug into it this morning with a couple of central office people. We have the number. I was very pleased with the number, but I don't know
What it's for.
what the strings are. Usually when you get supplemental aid, there's there's some strings attached. But if it's just straightforward ECS, that's going to benefit the town, and it's going to help mitigate any impact on the taxpayers in the mill rate. And that's exactly what the governor stated.
Either way, it's gonna help us out,
It's
for sure.
positive, yeah.
But it might be a one-time thing.
I don't know enough about it. I
Exactly.
think it is probably a one-time thing,
Yeah,
but
we gotta think.
again, this is
I
very
can
new.
cover some of it.
Yeah.
I can cover some of it in a minute.
Can we, can you go back to the capital improvement one again?
Yep. Yes,
Just
sir.
You had a bunch of different,
Let's see.
and can I get a copy of this whole presentation? It was so
We
great.
will provide the town manager with copies that can be distributed to everybody on the council.
Because as you know, I gave you a lot of questions earlier.
did, and I answered
You
all of
answered
them
them. You went through them fast. I like to absorb
Yeah.
them
Okay.
a little later.
Yeah.
But getting to the Stevens, is that 3 million left on the project? or
Yeah,
is-
that's an estimated
that's
number
what's
for the
needed.
work that still needs to be done.
Okay.
It's been a multi-year, multi-phase. We worked very closely with Mona to help get state reimbursement on some of it. I mean, to Mr. Savini's point, it probably should have been a referendum, but I'm not sure that there was an appetite at the time to do one, so the board's tried to address it in more of a piecemeal
Do
fashion.
you know how much has already been funded for other parts of that project? Because there's been funding set aside.
Number on that? Maybe 1.5 million, maybe?
That's how much we spent.
A little over a million. We can get you the details on that, We'll provide any additional information you need.
So that was a $4 million project.
Not when it started.
It's still 4 million left.
The longer we put it off, the more expensive it gets, so, and with the phasing cost. You phase in a part of it this year, then another part next year, it does add to the cost of that.
It is important to discuss that at the time too, about the HVAC at Stevens was one of those things that got pushed and now is like 2 times or 5 times more expensive because it wasn't funded previously, as well as the bus contracts, correct?
I think we lost some
Right, so
grant,
just to get to
too.
your question, Ms. LaFredo,
Yeah,
that'd
sorry.
be some information we had on the HVAC projects for Phase 1 and 2. The cost for Phase 1 was about $343,000, and that was installing the ductless heat pumps in the classroom spaces back in the 1957 wing. And that's really, it makes me feel good, because I wasn't born until 1968, so that's pretty good. I would have been a student there if I'd lived in Rocky Hill, that would have been great. And then in August 2025, we completed Phase 2, just shy of $700,000.
Okay.
And that was the installation of air conditioning and 2 air handlers in the gym. So there's still, a lot of work to do. And we're estimating 3 million, but could be closer to 4 million with the way costs rise and things like that.
That's why we should book it today.
So these other items on this CIP here, are you looking to get them all funded for this budget year, or?
No, for this year, we're
something?
asking for 1.7 million,
Okay.
and you should have that in your budget book, and I think we have a slide that outlines that too.
But that won't even cover Stevens. Right?
No, Stevens is scheduled for the following year.
Okay.
It's not scheduled for this year, so. Did you all get a budget book? You have that information in your budget books. I'll summarize it for you.
What are you looking at
I
for
do,
that
and I have a hard time
1.7
finding
for
it.
this year?
So 1.7 million, and it covers, it specifically covers the tech ed and media centers at the middle school, 681,000. The tennis court upgrade, which is $1 million over 2 years. We have 500,000 in it this year. We've had some conversations with Mona that if that's funded, it might just be a placeholder until the project's ready to do. Then
Just a
another
placeholder.
500,000 the following year, so you have the million. The bleachers, the visitors bleachers, 140K. Classroom furniture, 100,000, and then small projects, 200,000. And then I talked earlier about that library space, art room at West Hill. We basically have like a portable wall separating the media center from the technology room there where the kids work on computer skills. we're looking to get a full wall there, and I believe there's a carve-out legislatively specifically to Rocky Hill for $80,000 to cover that work there. So we'll have to get more details on that.
Great.
Do you mind me interrupting one quick? Mona, on this, the council adopted budget, didn't we have before we adopted last year's budget, a windfall of 1.2 million that we allocated in place of the 1.7 budget request?
It was the 1.6 for the roof.
1.6, I'm sorry, thank you. So
Yeah.
that's how we got to the 1.7 last year.
Right, yeah, that was money that we received when we closed out the books with Cigna.
Right, I remember, because there was
That was
a
a great
windfall
thing.
from
That was
insurance, right, and that's why part
excellent
of that
thing,
was
yeah.
covered, you know, and that was probably responsible for at least 1%,
Right.
if not 2% of the budget shortfall. Thank you.
No, I do want to thank you and your staff for, you know, there are cuts that have happened over the years, but you've always been superior with your staff, with your teachers, with our grades, with our test scores, and that's a credit to yourself and all your people that work for you. So, I mean, there are hard times, there have been cuts, but you've always succeeded and strived ahead for the best of our students, and that's a credit to all your people, your administrators, your teachers, everybody. So I thank you for that.
On behalf of the staff, I thank you. It's a very hardworking staff. They do a great job every day. They're very committed to what they do.
I did say, I know, Mary, you want to speak, but are you done?
Yeah.
Two questions came up from comments. Number one, it was brought up about being so good at special ed, which I know we have been, and we've been the darling of the area. If we did bring in from out-of-district students, you know, obviously, there's a revenue we'd receive for
Correct.
housing those students, but there's also an expense, you know?
Yep.
So does that become a net revenue or net expense? Net profit, net loss?
If it's done, we started the Dream Academy.
Yeah.
We used to outplace all those kids. Some of those kids are a couple $100,000 apiece
Charged to our district.
that we pay for, the
Right.
taxpayers pay for.
Yep.
I don't want to get deep into the weeds, but there is a formula that's used in special education.
Right.
The district is responsible for the first 4.5 times it's outlined in the letter of the per pupil expenses. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's in your letter.
It's a wide range. I
Basically,
remember the
It's about
conversation.
$80,000
Yeah.
something dollars that we cover. Anything over that, we typically get 70% reimbursement. So if it's a $200,000 kid, once you cross that
Yeah.
threshold, you get 70% of the delta back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're still losing 30%.
Yeah, we still lose 30%.
Right,
Correct. So
over
we're-
the 80, yeah.
Correct. We're
Okay.
still, right. So bottom line is taking tuition students could be a net revenue.
Could be, could not.
We'd have
yeah.
space concerns, and more districts are starting, we're kind of ahead of the curve, but more districts we've had several districts come over and ask us, what are you
How'd
doing
you
here?
do it? Yeah.
Because they're trying to control costs as well.
Yeah.
So I think, as you can see, and the state, I think, has an interest at this point in trying to get, Rocky Hill just qualified for a mental health grant. Only 5 towns did. We're one of the towns that's getting some additional funding. We might try to do some extra work with that grant that we just got notified about. But I think the state has an interest in trying to keep kids in their local schools instead of
Well, I
having
can see
tuition
it,
send them
right,
out because
yeah.
it's so expensive.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to think that this might be a boon for the town.
Well, that's what, I don't
We'd have-
either. I want to
There'd be space
yeah.
issues as well.
Yeah.
Like right now, we would not really be able to accommodate a lot of outside students to come into the district. There's just
Yeah.
a space, so
Yeah.
it's something that would have to be looked at. I'm not optimistic it would be a huge win for the town. You'd really have to look at space issues.
Yeah. It was more of a curiosity issue
Yeah,
because it was brought up, yeah.
No, it's been discussed before, though,
Yeah,
to
yeah, I know.
Mr. Van Leeuwen's point. It has been discussed.
Never in my mind was it a thought about a revenue windfall. It was
Yeah.
more that if our quality.
Well, I just don't want
service
it
were
to be
such-
an expense either,
Yeah, no, no.
right? To be so good that now we're bearing the expense of other towns.
It was more of
You
the
would
notion that-
legally charge, because every town is responsible for the tuition for its special education. So in a theoretical scenario where another town called and said, can we place a kid at the Dream Academy, for example, we would bill that town, and they would.
Sure.
When I was superintendent in East Hartford, we had a program that brought several $1 million in a year. It was a highly specialized program for behaviorally challenged kids. New Britain sent a lot of kids over, and there was a big check that came every year. So I mean, it can be done, but you need the space to do it.
And
I
you
just
mentioned
don't-
specialization, that's one of the keys to that sort of thing. I was, in bringing up, really referencing more that how proud I am of the quality of service we provide now, and that in growing even more, we could become a beacon for the region. I'm really proud of the service you provide on it.
And then I looked at the projection enrollment, right? And you may have this covered, but we have a need for 56 teachers right now, right?
Yep.
So looking at the numbers down the road, they do go down. Like, we've had consistent enrollment, but like if I look 5, even 10 years out, the numbers are almost significant, in terms of.
Yeah.
So I assume we're gonna have retirement fall off and whatever, but down the road, and you won't be here, right? But I hope we've got a plan where we're adding teachers when we need them, but we don't replace them when we don't need them, right? So it's
Yeah.
easier to swallow
Well, that's-
a new hire.
We have been doing that historically.
Well,
We
I
have-
saw that we've replaced one,
Yeah,
we had a
but we-
50,000 less salary, or whatever
Right,
it was. yeah.
but to respond to your question, first of all, those projections are done by the New England School Development Council. Like I said earlier, they look simply at birth cohort and building permits. They don't necessarily account for all the move into the apartments that we see.
Yeah.
So even though the projection is a slight decline, we've seen pretty flat, even slight increases. Even when you see a significant decline, you have to remember that's spread across 13 grade levels and 5 schools. So, someone going, oh, you're down 50 kids, you can reduce a teacher. Well, if they're spread across 13 grades, you don't necessarily, if they were all 4th graders on the west end of town, you could take a couple classes out of West Hill, but it doesn't usually work that way. Does that make sense?
It does, I just,
Yeah.
like,
But to your point, Mr. Savini,
Yeah.
historically, and I can tell you, there have been years, and Scott's sitting here, where we looked at enrollment over the summer, and we've had, a couple of years ago, we had a teacher resign from West Hill, moved out of state, husband got a job somewhere else. We looked at the numbers, we didn't replace the person.
good.
So
yeah,
there are
yeah.
years where that's happened here, where we're strategic, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we can make it work within the guidelines, we don't need to replace the person. We had an English position a few years ago at the high school, we didn't need to replace it, and we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I have always tried to manage in a fiscally responsible manner.
Exactly.
Doing that, and any superintendent that's doing the job properly, enrollment should be driving the staffing, and you should do a close and careful analysis of your enrollment each year when you do your staffing. They're directly related.
Right.
You need staff for the kids, and if your enrollment does drop, you should be able to see a decline in staffing, depending on where the drops are and depending how significant it is.
Right. I just, sometimes we don't have the mechanism to make that, I mean, obviously, we never want to lay somebody off.
Right.
So I think attrition sometimes will help the cause when it comes to it.
If it's done right and you're not violating class size, and I just gave you a couple of
Yeah,
specific
yeah,
examples
yep,
where we
yep.
did not replace because we didn't need to based on the
Right.
numbers.
So then you've been here 12 years, right? So
14.
I'm sorry.
14,
14,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
You
And those
added-
2 extra years count towards my retirement.
You added age to yourself, yeah. Not if I have my say. Listen, so you're bucking the trend that I'm actually looking at here, like the projection trend.
Well, so that's the agency that's used, everybody
I
in New
heard-
England
yeah.
uses them. That hasn't been our lived experience, if you look at the last couple years.
Exactly, so you're saying
Yeah,
we
we've
are
been pretty,
bucking
yeah,
that?
correct, yes.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so that makes it hard to plan too, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least the way I approach the work is I'm, a stickler with analyzing enrollment. We do
Yeah,
it on a
yeah,
regular
birth
basis.
rates are way down in this country.
They are?
Yes.
Yeah, they are, but we're also seeing some, students
we're
from other
not,
parts of the
yeah.
world that are coming in, and we've seen a pretty good influx here. The demographics in Rocky Hill have changed significantly in the last
Tremendously,
14 years.
Yep. Thank you very much, I'm done.
Good. All right. Thank you again. I'll jump around a little bit because I got a few questions, few points. One, just because it was the last thing that was mentioned around demographics and birth rates and stuff like that, I believe somewhere in here, talks about birth rates in Rocky Hill compared to the state and enrollment figures and stuff like that. And I think Rocky Hill has basically been flat when especially compared to population trends in the state and nationally. I forget what the numbers are, but I think Rocky Hills was like 0.2, down by like 0.2%, and the state was down by like 4%, and the country's down by like 7%,
You have the
or
whole
something
study
like
in
that.
your book.
I got it somewhere
Yeah,
in
it's
there,
the
I know,
book, yeah,
but
yeah.
that's the data behind it. And the enrollment, I appreciate this every year when you go through everything, because it all makes sense, and it's almost like you have a teaching background or something like that, and you can like teach people about stuff. But one of the things I remember from a few years ago, it was, well, the data shows that we're going to be down by like 200 students, in the future. But that hasn't been what has actually happened
Correct.
over the last few years.
Yep,
We
that
had
is correct.
unexpected bump at Stevens this year. You don't know that sometimes until the first day of class and kids show up that you weren't expecting. And sometimes when you're teetering on the edge of the guidelines, that's when you run into being over a little bit in areas. And it's not as easy in the elementary schools as it is in 4th and 5th grade and on, because you can't just move one more teacher around between two different schools and stuff like that. But also to the point of the population stuff, I've seen the figures from previous years. We haven't laid off teachers over time, but we've had some that haven't been backfilled.
Correct.
And that's how we get to having the same number of students and yet classes slightly larger, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for context, several years ago, I think the number of elementary staff was 61, and now it's 55. So there has been
Right.
some attrition. Again, I gave you one specific example. A teacher left midsummer one year. We consolidated. We hadn't started school yet, and we still maintained class sizes, but obviously they went up when a grade level was reduced by one teacher.
So that's how this has come about over time, not because people are cutting teachers or laying people off or anything like that. It's just,
Yeah.
and it's not because the population in the school has gone down. A lot of the population in the school has stayed the same, and yet just through attrition. The changes to class size guidelines came about a couple months ago, and that was adopted by the Board of Education, right?
Yes, sir.
Was that a unanimous adoption?
I believe it was.
As well as the budget that was adopted this year by the Board of Ed, was that a unanimous adoption?
Yes.
All right. So the CIP projects, sorry, I'm going to jump all over the place because I wrote questions down in different places, but the budget for CIP that is in this year is 1.7, and these are the projects that are identified
Yeah,
specifically
I
to
just
go
pulled
into
up that
that.
slide that's in your book, but we also have a slide that speaks to that.
Yeah. So I do believe that some of that has been identified in legislation that's tagged for us. I think there may be some other items in there. But we are looking at the HVAC for Stevens being something that is in the following year after this, right?
That's right, yep.
And was everything that was earmarked in the previous, for CIP last year, was that all completed? Or that's all like
No,
phased in?
the
or-
bulk of the current fiscal year was the West Hill roof replacement. We also had HVAC for Stevens, which was pushed out, so
So there wasn't anything in last year's that was a project other than the West Hill roof?
the West Hill roof was appropriated for the current fiscal year.
Okay. So it's not like there's any monies left sitting around that would go towards this one, right? And thank you for kind of estimating where we would be at ranking-wise, cost-wise for the DIRG. I noticed that those figures for the DIRG That's the 24, 25
Right,
figures.
those are the most recent
the most
availables.
recent one.
Because you can't have everybody running around doing their own calculations, so we wait for the state to do the calculations.
Right.
So we're looking at apples to apples
And we were-
comparisons.
19th or 20th, right?
Yeah,
based
we are
on
currently
20
19th, correct. And what I had done there on that slide is assuming every district went up 4%, where would we be with our 9% increase? We'd still be 16th. I think 4% is a very conservative estimate. We know that some of these other districts are coming in at 9.5, 11, and so
I've
forth.
spoken to executives in a number of towns where they're coming in at 11.5% and laying off teachers.
Yep.
Do we have any idea what 25, 26 would look like? I mean, were we still trending 19th?
I think we'll be lower than
that's the
19th
current
because
one.
we were at 3.6 last year. So they're always a year behind. So I
Yeah.
think we'll drop below 19.
Because
When you see this chart next year, if the new superintendent puts it in, you're going to see below. I predict below 19 because the 3.6 was a fairly low budget last year, given all the factors we're dealing with. So I could be wrong, but I think it's going to be lower than 19.
You said 25 to 30% of the student body isn't making the grade. I forget the exact verbiage, but it's not hitting goal.
Meeting proficiency.
Right. Do the items that we're talking about adding here or the actions that we're taking now, will that help?
So I think adding the ML teacher to give more targeted assistance to the kids that don't speak English as their primary language will be very helpful. I also believe strongly that social and emotional issues impact kids. So having a guidance counselor, having additional special education and social work support is going to help kids dealing with some of the problems they're bringing into school in terms of emotional and social development. And, that's kind of basic Maslow's hierarchy. If you can kind of address those lower level needs, then
Then everything
the kids
else.
are going to hopefully be able to focus a little more on their academic achievement. So I'm optimistic that that'll help. But, it's an important point that the chair made because we do talk frequently about how well we do as a district, and that's relative to other districts. But within Rocky Hill, and I've been saying this for years to our administrators, on any of these state metrics, it's typically 25 to 33% of the kids that don't meet the proficient level. Most of these metrics are broken into 4 levels. 4 is kind of, goal, exceeding goal. 3 is kind of the proficient level. 1 and 2, levels 1 and 2 on these tests, you're falling below proficient. And we're typically around 30% of the kids roughly fall into that band.
And, we can talk about the high achievers all we want, but we're really only doing as well as our most struggling students. Because we can, that's really the measure is it doesn't matter if we're sending a bunch of kids to Ivy Leagues if we have a ton that are not getting the resources
Yeah, I look at it holistically. I want to see the high achievers do well. It's good for the town. It's good for them. They're going to be, the town prepares them, the school system prepares them to compete for those colleges and be successful and be very productive members of our society. But you're right, we still have an obligation to make sure that the kids that are struggling also receive excellent services, and hopefully we can help them improve their outcomes.
And also I really like, obviously, you mentioned it, I've spoken with Jordan, Mr. S. from the Career Center, and I think we are providing a well-rounded opportunity for every student, whether they have additional special education needs, whether they're in one of our the transitional program, or if they're high achievers and want to be. I mean, one of the things that I've heard speaking with parents is some of these extracurriculars. Take the Model UN. It was hard to get somebody to be an advisor to Model UN. They talk about HOSA, we talk about DECA, we talk about these, and part of this budget includes, small stipends for faculty to help with that. Those are the extracurriculars that also really help there. But so I appreciate that we're trying to give those opportunities across the entire bandwidth, whether it's through the Career Center, whether it's through the Dream Cafe, whether it's in the Dream Academy, or it's these high achievers that have 100 extracurricular activities. One of the questions that I had actually was, do we have a good balance around extracurriculars like athletics, but also art, band, these programs like DECA, like HOSA, like, these other projects. It's, I've heard from a lot of band parents that say, why do we got to fundraise for the marching band so much? That type of thing. I just want to make sure that, those are also being, fairly treated as well.
To respond to that, there's a lot to unpack there, but.
Sorry, that wasn't, was that a question?
Well, yeah, I would just say that I think we do offer a very well-rounded program. As I alluded to earlier, our marching band is highly successful. We have really strong chorus. Kids qualify for All-State every year. There's a lot of enthusiasm in those programs. We didn't touch upon it tonight, but every year the school does musical performances, very well attended, really excellent. Kids are very involved, not just the kids performing on stage, but the kids backstage, building the sets and so forth. You talked about other pathways in your statement. The career fair that Mr. Shigell helped organize, and I want to give a big shout out to Wendy Duran and our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and John Fody, our high school principal. They were really kind of the driving force. Came to me a couple years ago. We would like to do a career center. They visited some schools. And then Ron Lamontagne did a great job putting that together. But that does reach out to the student who might not be interested in the traditional four-year college path, but might want to go into auto mechanics or masonry or plumbing or some of the skilled trades that frankly pay quite well once you get that 2-year training cert under your belt. So overall, I think the district does a good job appealing to the broad range of students that we have.
So I just want to talk. We've seen a lot of the DERG charts for like DERG B, for instance, that has a lot of our other neighboring communities that get a lot of accolades for their academics, whether it's Glastonbury, West Hartford, or South Windsor, or any number of these other ones. What do we need to do to make sure that we might not be in those buckets based on wealth of our community or size of population or something like that? But what additionally do we really need to compete with those higher balanced scores? I noticed there's some of them, the differential between us and top tier DERG B is 5 to 7 points, something like that for math or English.
Again.
And I don't mean like in a dollar amount. I mean the actual student services.
So you have to keep in mind that if you do the educational research, there is a pretty strong correlation between family income and student achievement. The DERG B towns are wealthier towns, so your average kid is coming from a wealthier family.
We try to punch above our weight class.
We are, and then, as I noted, we are right in the mix in those DERG B, rankings. We're not at the bottom by any stretch. We are punching a little bit above our weight class. Let me see if I can go back to those. And I think just continuing to do what we're doing, we see a pretty strong increase in achievement over time in this district. You look at science, for example, in DERG B. We just edged out Glastonbury. So we're clearly competing with those towns, and I think it's just a matter of continuing to prioritize education, keep a stable staff, keep people happy, keep them focused. And, we've seen, in my time here, we've seen consistently increasing student achievement. So I think the future's bright.
So DERG B also has like Greenwich,
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you
and,
know,
and that's the poor district for that part of the state,
but-
because the rest are in Durgay.
But number 3 is Farmington.
Yep.
You know, not a ton different than us. So in keeping in boxing terms, you know,
Yeah.
we can punch above our weight class, but what do we do to knock them out? And is something like class sizes, or are there additional, you know, programs that would make that difference, or that's something that they're doing that we're not doing? Do they have 16 students per kindergarten? Do they, you know, I guess, what are the differences other than just dumping a bunch more money?
Right.
You know, what are those potential things that might make a difference?
I can't answer that question. The first question in my mind, it would be to look at the percentage of special needs and ML kids in a place like Farmington. I suspect it might be lower,
Yeah.
but that would be a good analysis to look at.
All right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And thank you for you know, indulging me on that. And then I think that might be just about. And talking about it potentially like expanding the Dream Academy type program. I believe our lease is up in like a couple years.
2 years.
Right? So that the space limitations, that might be something, if we want to pursue that down the road, that we would have to look at changing the location for that or something like that.
You could
right?
look at another building.
Or a referendum to build a new one.
And I would, I've said this for several years too, if you do a referendum for a special education type post-18 transitional academy, you may want to consider enough space for your Board of Education offices as well. Pretty tightly packed. I mean, we get basically. You know,
You're spread out over a couple
about
floors
third
and
of
stuff.
one. Yeah, we get like, you know, a corner in this entire
I know, I
building.
run into you guys in the hall sometimes.
Yeah, you do. So, you know, we like our neighbors here. I've had a great experience for 14 years. But long-term, if you're looking at a kind of an outplacement type school where you might take kids from out of other districts into a transitional program, and you do a referendum, you may want to consider adding a board office to the.
We do bring in 1 or 2 students per year, right? If we have space, like we've in the past, we've
We
had
have a
1 or 2
tuition
students.
student this year. I delivered the check to Mona a few weeks
Yeah.
ago. I think it's the second time in 14 years I've had
Okay,
a
so
tuition
that's
student.
not a regular
rare.
thing, but when we've got
Yeah,
space. if we
typically
have
it's
a
somebody
spot.
moves out of town early in the year, they want to finish the year, they're not causing, and they write the tuition check.
Okay, so
that's-
it's somebody who has been here and then they moved away and then they
Yep,
want to stay in the
yep.
program.
And it's
and-
very rare because it's
Okay.
expensive, because we
Yeah.
charge them the per pupil expense, so
Yeah.
they write the check, and we don't have that too often.
Yeah. It was the age for children going into kindergarten. Is that still affecting some of the kindergarten numbers as well because of
Yeah,
some
that's
of
a
the
great
changes
question.
around that, or?
So we started kindergarten enrollment on February 15th, and at the time, the state law still required that we offer the waiver option for 4-year-olds that won't be 5 by September 1st. The legislation changed and the governor signed the law on March 3rd. At that point, we had about 28 kids who had already been waivered in. So the board had the option of continuing and to allow those 4-year-olds in for this year only, and then starting next year, prohibiting any child who has not achieved age 5 by September 1 will not be allowed in. You understand where I'm with that so far? This was an optional year for 4-year-olds.
Okay.
However, 28 families had already registered under the old rules. So to tell those families, too bad. we know
Sorry,
we
you gotta figure
registered,
something out now.
Figure it out, and keep in mind, daycare spots, preschool spots are disappearing. So the board, I think, made the right decision. The other advantage of that is you probably see a one-time dip next, not this fall, but the following year. And that may help relieve a little pressure on the budget in kindergarten that year. You know, looking at class size, you're gonna get that one-time
We'll maybe
dip.
get a double dip if we're
Yeah, I
adding a
think you'll get-
faculty member as well as not.
You
having
might be
those
able to
4-year-olds.
keep your class sizes where the board wants them, and that may have a one-time positive impact, because remember, it's basically a 4-month gap there. Because right now, the state law, the existing law was kids had to be 5 by January 1. So mathematically, that's a third of a kindergarten cohort. We have about 200 kids in a kindergarten cohort. Not everybody enrolls their 4-year-olds. I think you'll probably see a drop of maybe 40 kids that first year, and then after that, it'll bounce back up. So maybe a couple of classes might be able to be consolidated one time. But then the kids that are backed up
Yeah.
will come in the
Now
following year.
they'll
and
just come into
it'll
the next
stabilize,
class
yeah.
anyway, and
So with this, and I explained that to the board, you're gonna basically get a one-time bump, but to make that change this year would have been really tough on those families, and the board certainly would have heard about it, and some of you might have heard complaints as well on the council.
the difference between the assistant superintendent and the two positions, the special ed supervisor and HR or the personnel director, I guess, what is roughly what's like the dollar amount difference between that? Because it's a net one person, but obviously it's one person at a higher level and two at maybe different levels, you know.
Yeah.
What is
Just give me a
that
second.
differential roughly?
I want to say the differential, so let me just pull it up. I think I have that information. I want to give you exact numbers. So the new position at the central office is, including benefits, about 228. The eliminated position, including benefits, was 236, so that's an $8,000 savings on that position. But the new supervisor, including benefits, is 182, so about 174 or so total increase, 174,000.
And the responsibilities that they're taking on and the number of people that roll up to them, the two positions now, that's the most prudent level, director and supervisor?
We had a very talented person in that role, but there was a lot on that individual's plate. And even a couple of years ago, I remember a couple board members saying, boy, that assistant superintendent for human resources and special ed is a massive load. The HR work alone takes up an enormous amount of time. So remember, we have about 470 positions in our budget, 249 teachers, administrators on top of that, about 260 roughly certified staff, 264 certified staff. We have part-time folks, so it's well over 500 when you consider part-time people, closing in on 600. That's a lot of personnel to manage.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not
we
just-
as a town have, other than that, all the other town positions are 250,
Yeah,
something like
so
that.
it's close to
150 full-time,
What's that?
probably 150 full-time.
150 full-time
250
versus
total.
470 full-time equivalent, which is really in reality close to 600 people when you consider part-time individuals. So that's a lot of issues to manage with any stuff that comes up with federal leave, FMLA, any discipline. Unfortunately, any organization, you have to take corrective action sometimes against employees. There's a lot to manage there. Special ed is also a monster in terms of management, so the board, I think, made
And
the
a
right
lot of
decision
education
to-
required.
Yeah, but again, it's not
along
another
there, too.
central office person, I keep emphasizing
Yep.
that because it's support in the schools for the teachers and staff with the extra special ed administrator.
Boots on the ground, as they say.
Correct.
And just to clarify, that ECS breakdown and the supplemental breakdown, I think there's still some clarification needs to happen as far as how that can all be distributed. But the ECS is the supplemental ECS is supposed to be ongoing, is my understanding. And the other amount to to the town, the 471, that at this point seems like a one-time thing. But the part to the school seems like it is going to be ongoing because of a change ultimately to the ECS formula. And I think that there's a lot of towns with some questions around some of the language in that bill. Lastly, and sorry for jumping all over the place, but I take horrible notes, and I can barely read my own handwriting. The projections around school population, student population, that doesn't take into effect stuff that we know that we have in the pipeline. It didn't take into effect Kelson Row when that was being built. It didn't take into effect additional apartments at Stepney Place, et cetera. You said it references building permits, but in 24-25, we had, I believe, 4 new building permits, something like that. And yet we have 153 additional units that have already been approved over off of Corporate Ridge for apartments. So I think your assessment that the projections that were projected to go down, yet at the same time we are a growing community, seems like it's going to kind of level off a lot of that, even though, and with the influx we have of people that, quite frankly, have maybe more kids demographically than other towns.
Sure.
We don't have a ton of other information about that additional $1 million for special education that's getting divided among the 5 towns, right?
So I looked into that. The language, if you look it up, it's very technical language. It basically, the school district has the opportunity. It's basically an effort to keep kids from getting outplaced.
Yeah.
So contracting potentially with a qualified provider, the way the state defines a qualified provider, to provide clinical mental health services. I checked with our attorney recently. She's dug into the language. We talked about it today. Actually, we had some emails exchanged. I don't think it's as simple as just hiring a social worker.
Yeah.
I do think there's an opportunity. I'm specifically looking at West Hill with the needs in that Compass program over there, but potentially contracting with a psychiatric type of an actually qualified provider as it meets the definition defined by DCF and the state, and getting potentially some contracted services to come in, maybe for medication management, maybe for therapeutic counseling and things like that. But it is there, but it's very poorly, I mean, it's not poorly defined, but it's wonky language, if that makes sense.
It sounds like it doesn't really factor in budget stuff at all.
No, that would be something that wouldn't hit the operating budget.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm
something
looking
like-
at doing something there before I'm working really hard here before I walk out the door, and I'm trying to work with our Director of Special Education, Jesse Herman, to see what we can do to get that money and benefit the kids. There was not an impact on the operating budget, to be clear.
Right. I think it's something like we'll have this bucket of money to go and pay for this other company, this other service, this other whatever that's outside, just an added benefit from what we already
Qualified
have.
provider, but
Yes.
actually in a small specialized program like the Compass program could be very meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it could be very helpful. So I'm appreciative of the work that was done at the legislative level to carve it out, because we're one of 5 towns.
Yep. And I think we've got some other, as far as CIP and projects and stuff like that. You identified the $80,000 project that was in there, but I think there might be some other stuff coming too. It's just we only got a couple days left in the budget, so in the session, so we might get some other information. One more day. Sorry, I rounded up. I rounded up to 2. All right, I think that's all the questions that I had. Anybody have any follow-up?
Slight follow-up, just because Councilor Whalen asked about it, and you brought up that there's still questions about where everything will go. I intend, before we get through the budget process, to have a pretty good report on where this is going, at least as far as we can know.
Yeah, we've got a couple weeks or so, a little bit less, 10 days or whatever, that we'll be able to digest everything and see what that means to the budget and services and all that.
You're also right that the ECS formula has been changed as a result of this legislation.
Yeah, and to be clear, our school population is part of why we have seen such a difference. If you look at our surrounding communities, a couple, before the additional funding, the vast majority of communities got $0 in additional ECS because they weren't growing their population. If anything, they're losing population in their schools. They're looking at, adjusting everything because they're losing population. We were staying the same or growing some, especially, and growing our special education so much that it's affected
And
those
that
numbers.
might also factor into your knockout question with Derek B. too.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have anything else
Just
for
in
Dr.
closing, I
Zito?
just want to reiterate, since we're talking about this additional funds, that, it's been hard work by the others to get that extra funding, and other towns did not get this funding. Rocky Hill got
Correct.
this funding through hard work, and I think it's key to mention that. There's been some discussions on social media about it, and I just want to reiterate that, our legislators, Kerry Wood and Matt, have worked hard to get that money and work for us as a town, and not to mention others.
And I think they're still
Still
working
working.
hard for
Yeah.
this last day or so too.
I agree.
Burning the
Yeah.
midnight oil. I think they were
Yeah,
there until 11 o'clock last night.
In fact, today we got confirmation in the Senate that we are in fact getting our conveyance bill with the piece of property that DOT currently controls over where the 291 ramp would have been. So a lot of things happening all at once. We should be very thankful for the service we're seeing on the state level. And, whenever I get cake, I like to complain about it too.
Thank you.
Right? Thank you, Dr. Zito.
Appreciate it. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
and thank you, everybody. Thanks to all the Board of Ed folks who've come out tonight, past and present as well. But our meeting's not over, because we still have more to talk about.
Yeah, I blame you.
Zach is upset that he couldn't get back to the Capitol quicker to continue to argue for a couple things. Employee benefits and insurance. Mona, now you're up, right? Yes. Well, these are things that we really don't have a lot to say over.
Let's let him switch screens for us, and then we'll be able to keep rolling.
Does anybody need a break or anything? I think we can get through this one pretty quick. Everybody can hold tight.
Everybody's okay. I don't know where he lives.
You ran away. He said that's enough.
There we
No
go.
mas.
I'll take it from here, Ryan.
All right.
What does it mean that the screen is paused? Does that?
Want to take a minute?
No, it says the screen is paused. I don't know if we need to resume. I don't know what's going on. Oh, you're taking over? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Good. Okay.
All right.
So let's jump into employee benefits. I think we've talked about this before, but I'll just highlight for you. We actually had Board of Ed talking about their health insurance increases. As you know, we went into the state health insurance plan with the Board of Ed to get a better rate. And although we're coming in at about 14% for group insurance, that actually is a good rate. We avoided about a 30% increase, and our understanding is that if we remained, we would still been looking at that for this year. It's 14%. We have slight decrease on ours. I've got it at 13.5. We've been working with unions as we negotiate, trying to get them to make an additional contribution toward their share. So we've got basically unions going around from 10 to 12% of the premium cost. Social Security, obviously, that's just tied to the salaries. Our largest increase here is pension. Pointing out that for the current 25-26 year, we did not fund, and these are grouped together. Again, this is part of the new scenario, but it is not funded at its entire amount for neither the general pension plan or the police pension plan. The required contribution, actually recommended, not required, from the actuaries is for the general plan to be $543, and for the police 1.7. And this year, that was the same dollar amount being recommended. We get this on a biennial actuarial review. So the dollar amount we paid in was 1.8. That dollar amount that was recommended was this $2.2 million figure. Obviously, I think we've had me talk a lot about the importance of that. Presently, with both of those plans, we are funded in the low to mid 80s, depending on which plan you're looking at. And those are my highlights for employee benefits. Any questions?
Doesn't sound like there's anything we can really do about this, correct?
No,
Okay.
no, yeah.
Yeah,
Part of
so
that fund is determined on how the market does, correct?
Pardon me?
Part of the overall fund, though, is determined on, part of the growth of the fund is also return, correct? Like last year, we knew we were sitting good because we had decent returns from the year before.
I don't know if I'd recommend, if I'd say
I'm
that.
not recommending it, I'm just
No,
asking.
I would say
past.
because we were in those like higher 80s,
Yeah.
mid to 80s, then I think there was that comfort of saying, then we can do that for this year.
Right.
Obviously, it's not something we
not-
would bring
yeah.
it lower if we
I
continue.
just want to clarify
Yes.
what we were told last year. Yep.
Right. Yes. Okay.
And so you're saying now we're in the mid to low 80s? Or
Correct.
Low to mid 80s?
Yes,
Of where we're like recommended to be at?
correct, of funding the liability. So,
And, yeah, and just to reiterate, I've talked to other towns that are not on the same insurance, the state's insurance program that we're on, and yeah, they have like 20%, 30% increases in their private insurances. But we still take a look at some of that stuff pretty regularly, right, to see what's out there in the
Oh, definitely,
the
yes,
other, for having a different insurance provider
correct.
or benefits providers.
Okay,
All
I'm going
right.
to go to insurance, which is the liability workers' comp plans that we have here. The workers' comp is, we are with KERMA, CCM, CT, KERMA plan. This has been working well for us for a number of years, rather than going into private plans, which we had tried in the past. For the workers' comp, that is up to 7.5% and basically driven by some high claims. Obviously, I didn't go to the specifics, but we had some pretty large claims. This is an average of the prior 5-year history, so we should ideally see that lowering in the following year. We had a couple of high ones on the outer edge. We were fortunate to get for the, this is your liability, catastrophic, and public officials, a quote, it's a 3-year plan, and it's 3% for this year and going to 5% for the following. So again, for any kind of insurance policy, 3% is remarkable.
I'm going to go to the age-old question. We've spent 396 this year. Are we going to hit the 565 next year? I mean, that we allocated.
Oh, definitely, yes. Workers' comp, that particular one is paid quarterly, so we actually, I probably just did our last release. Actually, all of these are paid on a quarterly, so we will definitely cover that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that heart hypertension for me?
If you were working here, it could be.
All right, any other questions, benefits or insurance? No, all right. Contingency.
Okay. Let me see. I tried to bring a note with me on that one. Oops, sorry. So contingency, one line, but a very powerful line that helps us get through the fiscal year. This year is budgeted for $550,000. What the expenditures that come out of here, just to kind of clarify how this fund functions. The only direct expenses are from retirements. So you'll see, actually that's at 237, we're a little bit higher. I had a recent one paid out in this current payroll. The remaining portion that is not expended will be the amount that gets used as a resolution that we transfer to the funds that have gone over. For example, you'll get at year end, I don't know if many of you have seen them, but it's the transfer that says your highway overtime had a bad winter, transfer it out of here and cover this particular line. So that's what the remaining piece is. For the current year, I had myself a note, we're also going to take the $75,000 of CGR for the efficiency study from that dollar amount. I'm already looking at some of the line item overages. I mentioned storms, so we've got storms. And also the MEUI contract. As we're going through some of those salary lines and, you're not seeing a 3%, you're seeing like a 6% because a contract was settled after the adoption of the budget. Those dollar amounts will come from here to cover that. For this year, we had about $60,000 for that MEUI professional group. As we're moving into next year's, we're going to have the custodial bargaining unit. They start their new contract, should start on July 1. We're only at the very beginning of sitting with them for negotiations. So we'll need a reserve for that. The proposed for next year is at that same level. Of course, we don't know who's going to retire, but we've got some pretty expensive retirees when they do go. I'm looking, I had jotted down probably close to about 300 to 375 on what these are. Could be a couple of officers, could be, any bargaining unit, but just keep in mind that 550, let's hope we're gonna have a good winter because I think we could have some retirees that will absorb that. Also at this point, keeping in mind, I think our intention was to do something else with the efficiency study. If we did another one, this will be the source of revenue.
Mona, can you explain to me, and you've probably done it before, what do we pay on a retirement? I mean, that goes to pension eventually, but.
No, this is when this part is coming out, and it's a benefit that's basically for most bargaining units been cut off. So if you were hired prior to 2015, which is kind of the rule of thumb for most contracts, some may vary by the year, but if you were hired prior to that, if you have accumulated sick time on the books, you can get, depending how long you've been working here, if you're someone that's been here, hired before 2015 and you've got 20 years of service in, you'll get 60% of your sick time that's on the books.
That you've accumulated.
Correct. And we do have a few that are still, many years of service that were definitely hired before then. And that, probably myself included, who never take a day off for sick. It just tends to accumulate. So that's what that is. Eventually, when we get to that, all those people that were hired, after 2015, it'll phase out.
So that anticipated number, does that mean you're retiring?
No, it does not. I didn't put me in.
It was a joke.
Right.
But yeah, so
Let's keep her around.
You got to take more sick days. What are you talking about? That's what people aren't taking their time. So basically, yeah, like the person who's built up, weeks and weeks of sick time, and then they retire and they just get a fat check for the sick time that they didn't take. That comes out of the contingency.
That's what this is, right?
So in this document, it says we're projected at using 350,000 out of that last year's budget allocation. Is that still accurate?
Yes, and again, keeping in mind when I'm giving you the 350, that is also paying the CGR for the efficiency
Right.
study. So yes, that is accurate.
But we still think that we're going to need 200,000 more next year because of
Yes, again,
retirees
yeah,
plus
I'm gonna
storms
try
plus.
So even though the expended piece of that for this year is the 350, there will be at the end of this year, thinking just this year, a resolution that will say, now of that 200 that's on the table, give part of it to the overtime for the highway department,
Okay.
give part of it to the overtime, so all the varying lines that could be over. So
Okay, so
it
so
will
then
be
ultimately,
fully expended,
yeah. So then ultimately this year we will spend 550.
absolutely,
Okay.
this year and next.
Do we do that great in 2025, as it says?
Just
158?
fewer retirees, and it was probably a very good thing, because in that year, we had a large over-budget situation for police overtime,
Yeah.
which took about
That
200,000
was
of
the one
that.
we were down by
That was- just
6 or 8
wasn't-
people or something.
Right, yeah, about 6 people out, probably over 200,000, closer to 3, that covered overtime for police.
Why do we start this contract negotiation so late with this new bargaining unit? You're saying July 1st, they're due, we're just starting now. Why haven't we started months
We
ago?
started at least, well, about a month
A
ago,
year.
and we did, start the, let's get your guide rules, and we still have to sit down and iron it out. So, we're at the infancy stage of it, so we know who the team is, who's going to work together.
That's
Hopefully a
something
smaller
that,
contract.
I don't know, the town manager and you guys should both think a year out. We shouldn't be trying to wait until months out. We know now we're gonna be using contingency monies. We can't even budget for it. And we're started with the police already. I just don't understand why we're not starting with all bargaining units.
Yes, yeah, this, I think, is.
Something to keep in mind, maybe
Right,
try to,
yeah, this is a
try to do.
custodial group with a smaller group of members, but you're right, I
but it's
agree.
still coming out of contingency at some point.
You just make sure, I guess, when this one's up, time it
Right.
so that
That's what
it's
I'm
supposed
trying
to be
predict.
signed by June 1st instead of July 1st or something like that.
Right,
Correct, yeah.
that's,
Just,
that would be a
let's
goal.
do it, try to do something like that in the future, maybe. Thanks.
Anything else on contingency?
That's it.
All right, debt service?
We're going to talk about an account we can't do anything about, but as you can see, these are just line by line, the principal expenditures. We have it going this year from just the principal from 5,025,000 to the 5,370,000. You do have a new principal, a new debt line item, which is up here, which is the debt for road improvements. That is the dollar amount that we used for this last round of $10 million road referendum. So basically, when you're going out and you expend it, then we can go back and do the bond sale and sell to cover the expenditures. So this will be the completion of the road referendum. As you know, we've basically expended the entire thing as of this year. So that will be the increase there. But of course, on the interest side, I'll hop over here, you'll have a decrease. So overall debt compared principal and interest will be a decrease this year. And what basically happens with your interest portion, it'll decrease depending on whatever the bond amount is. Your principal payment stays, we like to have them structured so that the principal stays consistent, and then the interest will gradually decrease. I think we did our presentation before, so by 2044, we'll be debt-free. It will be that $6 million for roads. But I think in
We won't need roads.
2034,
We'll
you
have
make a
flying
big
cars
chunk.
by then. We won't need to do any more roads by then.
So, Again, we think about what should we do in some of these expenditures, clearly. I think you can see what happens when you do go out and do the referendum and pay them. Ordinarily, a bond will go out for 20 years, and it'll be bonded after the expenditures. So I think if we had something, you could probably push that date out to like 2048 or something like that.
But that just goes to show every time we have a referendum, we're continuously adding debt to our town,
That's correct.
millions of dollars.
Any questions, anybody else?
Motion to adjourn.
Is it over? We done?
That's,
Okay.
that's it for today, right?
That's it.
All right, and then that means we don't have to come back Thursday.
Correct.
We finished this today, which is Counselor Thoreau's birthday. Thursday.
Giving me the day
Thursday.
off. Thank you
That's-
all.
Thank you.
So that she's got
Excuses for any
Thursday
of us,
off.
I'm not texting her.
All right, and we only have a couple departments left, right?
Right, you'll have fire
Fire and
Fire
Human
Marshal and Human
Services.
Services on Tuesday.
And I
that's it.
think that's it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
There's been a motion to adjourn and a
Yeah,
second.
and a second, all
Is
in
there any
favor?
discussion?
Aye.